Rich has a unique drum style. What was it like learning all those finger 11 drum parts? And Rich actually wanted to know when he sent the quote, he's like, I'd be
Yeah,
curious to know just what it was like to learn those parts. Cause it's one thing to be the one that made them and you're playing them. It's one thing
sure,
like it's in
of course. Oh
your
man,
style.
you have all the respect for the people, because playing them is one, like, lifting them from an album is one thing, but creating is a whole different thing that you have a deep appreciation for. Learning learning well, tip, which was, and I knew this after when working with Arnold, that's a lot of Arnold writing drum patterns. Nobody had to tell
Because
me
that's
that.
before Rich, right? Rich didn't play on tip.
That's a guy named Rob, um, who was drumming on that album. And for as far as I know, he was a solid drummer as well. And that's a lot of Arnold crafting those parts with the guys, right, based on the riffs that they're writing. And so lifting those ones was like, that was a quicksand and above, and just like these incredible drum parts. And then I think where Rich entered, where he was creating the parts, was on the self-titled, right? With
Good
Good
times.
Times and Absent Elements and Stay in Shadow. Those are phenomenal drum parts. Like Good Times is like, you can solo that drum. It's what I talked about before with like Travis Barker and Dave Grohl. It's like you can solo the drum track, and it's like that's a hook by itself. Like that's a song by itself. That was Good Times for me. That, from start to finish, that entire drum track is like, it's iconic, man. It's so good. So learning that one was a lot of fun, and because he has a unique drum style, you have to adopt that in your playing, right? So yeah, I mean, very very fun to go through and dissect the parts. And again, you don't want to just do, well, it's like, well, okay, well, that was his take and this is my take on the track. It's like, no, you're trying to be as close to that as possible, because that's what the band's used to, that's what the fans are used to, and that's what Rich intended, right? So if he intended that and it's successful, why would I want to change it to make it, me? And that's a lot of artists do that, and that's fine. But when somebody's already done the work to create this drum part or guitar part or bass part, whatever it is, you want to try and match it as close as possible. And I think I'm doing a good job at it. So
Yeah. And in a little bit, we'll talk maybe a sneak peek at there's new music that you're
yep,
working on. That stuff is where you'll be able to put in your own
yep,
style and
exactly,
your
yep,
own, that's where
yep.
you'll be able to get super creative. So behind me here, you can see I have the Grayest of Blue Skies. So these are my 12 favorite albums from guests that I've interviewed on the podcast. So in honor of Rick, Rich, and you, I got the Grayest of Blue Skies here. Maybe when the new album comes out, we'll put that up there as well.
Yeah.
Did you hear that on this album, The Grayest of Blue Skies, it was actually all an electronic drum kit?
Oh
It
yeah,
was like
yeah,
a V drums or
yeah.
whatever. It's
Drums, yeah,
crazy. The drums
yeah.
sound amazing, and then you hear
And
later it was this early electronic kit.
the story behind that was, I mean, hearing this from Arnold, was, I think that like it was programmed, and then I believe like they wanted to try and replace those after, because it was programmed first for them to like play along to, and then I believe it was like they're trying to replace it, but they were trying to go for this industrial sound like Nine Inch Nails and these types of bands, which sounded exactly like that, right? With the
Yeah.
really like cold sounding guitars and drums, and like they nailed it in my opinion. And hear songs like Drag You Down, it's so like rigid, and like, so I think they ended up staying with those, and the drum sounds are phenomenal. And that's like, nowadays you have this software that you can make V drums or Superior Drummer or any of these programs to sound as real as possible. But to have that, back then, make them sound that good, they sounded fun. I didn't know when it came out that it was electronic.
I didn't know that, and that came out when I was 15, and I didn't know until the interview a few months ago with
Yeah,
Rich that was an
yeah,
electronic kit.
yeah,
It was like it was like a confession from him. He was almost like embarrassed that,
yeah, yeah,
and then later on he felt like he had more say in everything.
yeah.
I think also the early 3 Days Grace stuff, they had the V drums as well. So that was all like ahead of its time. Um, did you have any fear joining a band that was already successful, or was it mostly just excitement? You knew you were the right guy, you knew the parts, or is it there a fear of like, man, this is one of my favorite bands. These guys are already multi-platinum and Juno award winning. You know, everyone had kind of has that imposter syndrome in there somewhere of like, you know, am I the right guy? Should I be
Yeah.
here? Do I deserve this?
You know what? I One would think that you'd be that, you know, there's a fear attached to it, or being nervous, but I didn't. I honestly didn't. I met the guys, solid guys, did the audition, felt right. First show was flawless. Like I played the parts exactly how I should. And I felt like I that was what I was supposed to do. Like I'm a firm believer that everything happens for a reason. And I was supposed to meet them. I was supposed to be in the band. And I never once had a fear that came along with it, that, you know, like what if, or maybe I'm not the right guy. I knew I was the right guy. And I think part of that is because they've told me that many times. They're like, dude, you're meant to be in this band. Like we were supposed to find you. You were supposed to find us. They reassured that pretty early on. Like there was never like the band and then myself, right? It was always like, no, you're in the band. Like you're working hard to, you know, make the show as successful as, you know, as we all want. And they've always made me feel like a member. So I've never once felt like, you know, is this, you know, do I deserve this or like that? It's like, shit, if I was 18 years old and I joined the band, that was an established band, it'd be like, man, do I deserve this? I haven't paid my dues. But by that point, I'd already been touring for like 14 years, sleeping on hotel room floors in Europe and America, and piling in a van with 7 other people and sleeping on people's shoulders and shit like that. So it's like never once. That's why when, you know, when I get the, oh man, you're lucky. Yeah, you create that too, right? You create that. So when you hear you're lucky, it's like, no, it's not luck. Yeah, there's luck that's a part of it, because there's a lot of people that work their ass off and they're talented and maybe they don't get those opportunities, but you create that along the way. Like if you're paying your dues for 15 years, can't really call it luck, right?
Yeah, the old 15-year overnight success.
That's it. And so you can't, like, you create that.
What do you remember from that very first show that you played with Finger 11?
It was North Bay. What I do remember is the intros of songs. Just get that right, and then the rest is, you know the parts from there. It's just because we weren't playing on click at that point, because I guess they weren't doing that at the time, or maybe they were, I'm not really sure, but those shows we weren't playing to a click, so tempo was a big deal. It's freeform at that point. You establish the tempo. So it's not just about playing the part and make sure the arrangement's right. It's the tempo of the track. That's everything. But because the production background, I listen to the singer always, the breathing pattern, the syncopation, all those things. So I'm listening to Scott the entire time. And that's what I still do now. If I find himself, he's stumbling, it's too fast, right? And so it was just picking the right tempos that they can lock into. That was one that I was definitely thinking about, because live too, there's a whole bunch of adrenaline that comes along with it. And what you think is like, you know, slow, it's like, it's probably too fast. So it's just keeping that, and just that excitement. It's like, holy shit, I'm playing in front of Finger 11 in front of like 5,000 people. Like, relax on the tempos, like kind of, you know, breathe and everything's going to be fine, sort of thing.
You have it within your power to play the song so fast that you turn Finger 11 into an all-out dance band. You just 100%. Know that you have that power at any point. You could flip the switch there.
And that would be my last show. Exactly.
Yeah. It works every time but the last.
Yeah.